Assalamu alaikum. You're watching Views and News, and I'm Faisal Rehman, live from our Islamabad studios. Today we'll be talking about this overall IMF package deal that was going on for quite some time. Negotiations were going on. Now we have learned that the IMF is going to give about $1 billion as an initial installment of that total fund, which is $6 billion. That is definitely going to benefit in a lot of areas. Forex reserves will be increased, and obviously it is going to ease rupee against dollar also. Now, before we in fact discuss further about that, our production team has prepared a package. Let's watch that, and after that I'll introduce you to our panelists and we'll obviously talk about it.
Pakistan and International Monetary Fund have reached a staff-level agreement regarding the revival of its $6 billion extended fund facility program. However, the statement released by International Monetary Fund stated that the agreement is subject to approval by the Executive Board following the implementation of the prior actions, notably on fiscal and institutional reforms. The statement by the IMF recognized that despite difficult circumstances, Pakistan has qualified all quantitative performance criteria for end June with wide margins except for the primary budget deficit. IMF stated that the finalization of the National Socio-Economic Registry and the parliamentary adoption of the National Electric Power Regulatory Authority Act amendments were the notable achievements of Pakistan. The IMF also acknowledged Pakistan's efforts in improving anti-money laundering and combating the financing of terrorism framework. International Monetary Fund statement acclaimed the responses towards coronavirus pandemic and tax revenue collection by the Federal Board of Revenue as strong steps, which lead to the strong economic recovery. The IMF recognized that Pakistan was bearing the brunt of external pressures in the form of widening current account deficit, depreciation of exchange rate, reflecting the compound effects of the stronger economic activity and expansionary macroeconomic policy mix and higher international commodity prices. The IMF emphasized that the monetary policy needs to remain focused on curbing inflation, preserving exchange rate flexibility, and strengthening international reserves.
Now, to talk about this, we have with us in our studio, on my right is Amer Zafar Durrani Saab, who is the president of Re-Energia. Thank you so much, Durrani Saab, for your time. And we also have with us Ahmad Hassan Mughal Saab, former president of Islamabad Chamber of Commerce and Industry. Pleasure to have you, sir, as well in our show. And we also have with us Muzzammil Aslam Saab. He is the spokesperson to the finance minister. Thank you very much, Muzzammil Saab, for your time also, sir. Thank you very much once again. Yeah, let me start off from you. I mean, Muzzammil Saab, we have learned that the first installment of $1 billion is going to be issued very soon by the IMF. Now, talking about the terms and conditions, I mean, whenever we hear about the conditions imposed by the IMF, we hear that they are talking about the structural reforms, they are talking about privatization, liberalization, they're talking about terror financing issues should be tackled, as well as money laundering. Now, perhaps the current negotiation was pretty long as far as the negotiations are concerned. The finance minister has been to US a couple of times, and then the negotiations were going on. Currently, can you tell us about the details? How much money will be transferred? What about the rest of the money? And then, obviously, we would also like to know about the terms and conditions which the IMF has said, because we have been hearing that they have asked the Pakistani government to introduce a mini budget. So that seems to be something of prime concern. Your take.
Okay. Today, we've got the sixth review, staff level review done. And this is supposed to be done maximum by October 20th last month. So it has extended by a month from its deadline. And during this time, everybody was like speculating something going to be wrong with IMF and Pakistan, or the program will be halted or stopped or failed. So there was a number of speculations around in the market and in the newspaper and the media as well. Today we've got the staff level done, and we need to do 5 prior actions before we get a next tranche of $1 billion. And after $1 billion, the total disbursement amount in this program, EFF program, is going to be $3 billion. But what is important to know is what are those 5 prior actions we need to comply with. Number 1 is state bank autonomy related to exchange rate and monetary policy autonomy. IMF said, and it is a best international practice, every central banker should be independent from the influence of finance ministry as far as the policy making concern. Which is why, they are going to regulate finance if they are going to overshoot their spending, etc. Or, in the historically, if you look at the Pakistan pattern, different political parties, they have used central bank as a tool for their elections or for their different political gains. So that is the one prior action. Number two is we have to increase the petroleum development levy 4 rupees per month till we hit 30 rupees per litre petroleum development levy. Remember, for the last so many years, we have been charging 30 rupees PDL, petroleum levy. But, in the last 6-8 months, international prices have risen quite a lot. So Prime Minister has been compensating, people through cut his own petroleum levy. That is the number two prior action.
Should we expect the petroleum prices to go up on regular basis?
Depends on international market. If international markets are going to come down, then don't expect it. If it is going to be stronger, then one should expect it. But at the moment, the good news is in the last 7-8 days, the international crude prices have came down, but we should not rely on this number. We have to wait till...
So it's a matter of demand and supply. The moment the demand is always there, but if the production output isn't there at that optimum level, I mean, where there could be an equilibrium between the price and the production, it is going to be a problem. But anyway, we understand that is a global issue. Pakistan will have its own share, and the impact is going to be there. But anyway, so number three.
Okay, that's number two. Number three is they've asked us, we've done some spending in COVID vaccines or COVID funds. So they have asked us where we have spent, get this audited with Attorney General of Pakistan. Get this audited. And they wanted to know who is the beneficial owner if we give order for vaccine or for anything. So that they need to know. Number
so
four
that
is,
means, again, sir, if I may ask you a very straightforward question, do you think, sir, all those transactions, whatever money was given to the NDMA primarily, sir, that was huge sums, the transparency was there or not? Or why are they, in fact, why do they want to know?
no, everything is supposed to be audited.
Okay.
That is.
No, it should be audited. But do you believe, as a very senior representative of the finance ministry, that all those transactions were clear and were transparent?
Yeah, I'm sure there should be, and why not? That is the question. I should ask you, why not? Do you
Because
support...
normally we end up hearing things after 5 years when the next government comes in that this kind of a fraud was committed, and then, But anyway, sir, got your point. Number four.
Number four is the exemption withdrawal of the sales tax. Here we cut the deal for public. We have asked IMF, we are not going to withdraw exemptions on the essentials like fertilizers, tractors, there are a number of things, maybe essential food items. So there will be withdrawal only, if they are non-essentials or durable goods. Number fifth is cut in development expenditure by 200 billion rupees. That to cut down our overall deficit.
Which deal, sorry? So which deal? Number 5, can you repeat, please?
The cut in development expenditure from 900 billion to 700 billion.
Okay.
Yeah. The important thing is people were speculating there will be an increase in gas prices, electricity prices further. There will be an increase in electricity prices, but after a while, after a few months, and it will be very small depending on the prices of fuel and everything.
All right, Muzzammil Saab, thank you so much for the details you have provided us, sir. Take care of yourself. Now, sir, so we have those 5 interesting, demands by the IMF. First one, let's start off from there, sir. Exchange rate and primarily the monetary policy. That's what they're talking about. So, sir, interestingly, when you have raised your interest rate by 150 basis points from 7.25 to 8.75, so there was a lot of hue and cry in the business community as well. They said that, you know, they could have done it like in stages. They shouldn't have immediately done that. But that's the reason, you know, they claim that, you know, this is how we will be curbing the inflation. But I think, sir, that demand was by the IMF primarily. Because if you're putting levy of 4 rupees per litre, I mean, petroleum prices will go up, so eventually inflation and then the trickle-down effect. I mean, don't you think there's a direct conflict between the two? Durrani,
well, Faisal, thank you very much. Look, first and foremost, there are not 5 conditions. I mean, if you read the document that the fund has shared with the world, there are a total of 13 conditions. These are basically the broad conditions. I think what Muzzammil has highlighted is some of those actions which were pending and or are now, you know, were the core of the negotiation.
If we do this, then we will get 1 billion.
Yeah,
that's
so as you mentioned, 2.2 billion has been paid, billion is coming in. Now, the three, and I think
more.
If we were to look at core, the core which had this thing go covered was increase in petroleum levy, so that the PDL goes to 30%, which he said very well. The other one basically is the size of the federal PSDB. He kept calling it the package. It's not the package, it's the public sector development program, which actually is now, has been told that you've got to
slash it down.
Well, from 900 billion to 700 billion. Now, that is something that the government should think about. But the last one where he said that no gas, no this, well, you know, the basic thing is that electricity tariff is going to be increased. Power tariffs have to go up. Why do they have to go up eventually? And coming to your first question, the basic question, the policy rate. If you remember in our last program, we talked that, you know, in effect, the policy rate was going to go up anyways, given the inflation, right? Because otherwise you get into negative interest rates and you really don't want that because nobody benefits from that. Everybody is speculating about 2 things in Pakistan these days. The first one they are talking about is the sort of the depreciation in the rupee. Now, let me quote 2-3 numbers to you, and this is courtesy of Dr. Hafiz Pasha and obviously his institute. Basically, he has done a modeling analysis. This came out just a week or 2 ago, or at least it was published, and we got access to it. And he did a with IMF and a without IMF analysis. So on your question of the policy rate, his analysis is very clear. He says that with IMF it's at 2, without IMF it would have gone 2.5. So with the IMF there, 1.5 or 150 basis point, as you were saying, is the result, and it still has a margin. But in his calculation, again, depreciation of the rupee, this is really startling. You know, this is a Pakistani think tank providing you numbers, and Hafiz Saab is famous for his belief and in his numbers, and I have no reason to doubt them, to be very honest. He has probably one of the best databases. And if you look at it, the extent of depreciation of the rupee percent, right, with IMF 12.5.
12.5.
And without fund 20%. Now, essentially, you know, there are 2 points of views that are going on here. And the first is, just 3-4 days ago, we had Arthur Laffer here. I mean, you know, the economist who, the Laffer's curve. And he basically said a couple of things which had everyone drumming. I don't know if you've been reading the headlines from Dawn to Tribune to, and the talk shows saying that Pakistan should either just say bye-bye to all and default and then control things internally. There is another extreme group which says nothing can happen without the fund. So basically, Pasha Saab's report right now, the analysis gives us this very fair idea that, you know, honestly, you can not do without the fund because the funds actually. Now, let me give you one last example on this, why I think Pasha Saab may be in the right direction. Although there are some, you know, everyone has to disagree with some of the details.
Like that, yeah.
But if you go back to the Debt Limitation Act of 2005, and I did this research when, you know, your producer called in the morning, and I said, let's think about this. So the 2005 Act actually limited how much debt the government could take on. It also made it clear that how much expenditures should be directed vis-a-vis poverty reduction. And if you look at what the fund is doing, despite the fact that it has a contractionary effect or an apparent contractionary effect right now, it seems to be taking us back to our own Debt Limitation Act, which was abrogated by Durranomics tremendously. After 2010, we've never been within the limits of our own Debt Limitation Act. So, that's where the picture
And the debt
is.
to GDP ratio is like, it's exceeded
Yeah.
around.
So the Debt Limitation Act actually said that it should actually be at 60%. And then it should be. By 2010, you were supposed to bring it down to 60. And actually, so if you realistically look at it, before we criticize the fund, and I am one for criticizing the fund, but then I look at what as a policy, as a democratic nation, do we have on the table, which we are now saying have ourselves not followed. So our Debt Limitation Act was not because of the fund. It was because
totally
of
agree
our
with you.
internal parliamentary decision.
Because if there is some fund that is available for a certain reason or for a certain purpose, and if it's not utilized wisely, this is what happens. Mughal Saab, what's your take, sir?
It's always been like that, whenever we're going into an IMF program, what the IMF is trying to do is always trying to stabilize the economy. They're trying to curtail the growth rate. They want the economy to stabilize in a way, that the states stop their spending, curtail their spending, as well as you're looking into how they could reduce their expenses and keep the growth rate down. You've seen that during Corona we had like favorable balance of trade. The reason for that was that not a lot of raw material was being imported, the requirement for the oil and for the energy, and these kinds of issues were there, and this was the reason that we were having such a favorable trade balance of payments as well, that we were not into a lot of production. Now since things are coming back to normal, you've seen that
Everything is
inflation
picking up.
everything is coming into in pieces, and there's an increase in internationally. It's unfortunate that the prices have gone up in the past couple of months, and it's been completely.
So what did we do when they were down bottom, when they were, literally at
the thing is,
rock bottom?
at that time, the economy was almost at a standstill at the moment. And if we were a country like some other developed nation, that we could have the reserves and we could have stored some oil over there. But unfortunately, whichever government comes in, they're doing mostly firefighting.
Decisions are always ad hoc based, unfortunately.
Definitely.
So when you're living day-to-day life, this is what happens, sir.
Definitely.
When long-term policy is missing, implementation is a different issue again. But that is one thing very, very unfortunate. Now, sir, normally when we talk about that, this is what the demands are, this is what it is supposed to be like. I remember when the government took charge, the government of PDM, and I'm talking about the previous government, they said that this year we'll try to make sure that the current account deficit to GDP ratio should be around 3%, right, sir? It's hovering around 6%, and I'm sure it's going to go much up. Let's suppose it touches 6.57%, which is possible because now, sir, looking at those kind of figures, where you have no control over what's happening, the prices of the imported products, they have skyrocketed. God knows that what should be the real price and what we're being charged as a final consumer. You talk about your exports. Now, literally, sir, you talk about the containers, 3,800 rupees, 40 container is practically being booked at $20,000. This is unbelievable. And the travel time, the blockade, and so much more is happening. Rupees under tremendous pressure. This is not a very good look. I fail to understand when the very, very senior members of the government and the policy makers, they come up and they say, well, the economy is doing really great. 4%, this is what you expect. This is what IMF says. And at the end of the day, I don't know whether you'll be able to achieve that or not. And perhaps that is one of the reasons that they are not really looking at the GDP growth. The inflation is currently the mega issue.
Definitely, what the government was wanting at that time, they were trying to control all the imports, as well as, they were trying to entice people to come into Pakistan, start making the products over here. But there's a few companies that have come in telcos especially. They've come into Pakistan. But what was supposed to happen was those economic zones, they were supposed to be functional right now and in that time. But unfortunately, due to Corona, everything came to a standstill. They should have, given them incentives for people, for international companies to come into Pakistan, start a production over there, and give some relief, because at the moment, you see each and every dollar counts for our economy over here. And with exports not increasing as they should have, and we're still relying on the traditional products that we've been exporting for the last 30 to 35 years.
I'll just give you one example. So, Faisalabad, I mean, that is the hub for your textile. But Gujranwala, again, is known for its, I would say, SMEs, and there's a lot of industry, a lot of employment has been generated over a period of time. And I was watching a report on one of the private television channels, and the reporter asked this head of that union of those industrialists out there, and he said, well, we have been promised that we'll get gas without any intervals so that we can work. And he says, forget about the gas used for the houses or for other commercial purposes. There is no gas available for industry. So, I mean, the promises are there, promises have been made, but reality is very opposite to that.
Whenever each and every, there's definitely there's going to be what you must have heard in the news that there's going to be a shortage of petrol in a couple of days. So this is going to starting a strike on the 25th over there. And this is what they were saying as well. We were promised that you would be given a percentage of what the price of the petrol would be, but now we've been giving in just a few rupees that we'll be given on per liter. So whenever a government comes in, they give us give hope to the business community, that we're going to provide you relief, and we're going to provide relief to the public as well. But in the end, when they start functioning over there, and they see the situation, and then you see that the taxes start increasing, the prices of utilities goes up, and this is what happens in each and every government. So I think the public is used to it. Whatever is promised is never delivered to the public.
Very, very unfair. Forget about the textile industry, or forget about the SMEs or the microfinance or whatever. Durrani Saab, another important area is that when you talk about fertilizer or any input used in the agriculture, sir, I mean, they say that let's not subsidize that. We are already fed up of this hoarding issue, sir. And in fertilizer, exactly this is what happens, sir. Few people control. There's a monopoly, or rather a cartel, let me put it this way, sir. I mean, how the government is going to manage this issue, sir? Fertilizer.
Well, okay, so I think...
What about the Kisan package and all?
No, the Kisan package is actually there so that when fertilizer goes up, the Kisan can get the package and buy the delta increase. I mean, technically speaking, this is, and I agree with what Mughal said, is that we as a nation, some of us are used to it. So the Kisan package going to whoever it's going to go to, I mean, that's a very different story. But let's say, assume it goes to this 12.5 acre above and not the large or below, what we call the small farmer. And let's assume it goes to that farmer who actually owns that 12.5 acres, which is actually a very small amount of farmers. Then the question arises that if that happens and the farmer is the legitimate farmer legitimately avails the Kisan package, then obviously things are okay, because if the fertilizer prices increase, that is exactly why the Kisan package is there. That this increase in fertilizer prices is a market mechanism. So the government is sheltering affectees from that market exchange rate increase. And I'm very happy, although not internally, but government does not let markets work. So here is a realization by the government that yes, we cannot control DAP prices, we cannot control fertilizer prices for XYZ reason, right? So therefore, there are two ways to do it: buy it and interfere, and the other is that go to the end user and legitimately subsidize some of their costs, the input costs for their agricultural inputs. That's what's been done. But I think there's a much wider question in that one is, sort of gets from your question. If you look at realistically all these 13 conditions and on the core 5 and the core 3 conditions we talked about, I think it's very important to understand that it's not just the fund. I think the government itself is accepting these conditionalities, because let's be very fair. This government at least has been quite transparent, quite pushy.
They've been showing what's going on.
Yeah, they've been showing what's going on. I mean, I hardly heard, or I'm sorry, there was not much on news, even on PTV, when the last EFF was negotiated, let alone even when it broke down. So on one hand, but I think the government intentionally wants 2-3 things to happen. And number one, and I think some of that from the gestures, your postures, and also some of the verbal sort of enunciation by both the finance minister as well as the other cabinet ministers. Pakistan's industry, and with all due respect to the chambers and everybody, and its agriculture, everybody, services, are not very adaptive. They're not very adaptive because when things change, let me give you an example. If you really are making a buck on producing, let's say, a towel, and suddenly the electricity price goes up or the gas input price goes up, what do? You suffer a loss for a little while, your margins of profit go down, or you increase your sale price abroad or here. And then comes a point in time where anybody, if they were in the US, would shut that industry down, invest that money into something else. Because remember, no industrialist is sitting in Pakistan today of the people, and there are some new entrants, but these old people have already recovered their capital capexes on their factories, right? They have enough profits lining their pockets that they can simply go to another kind of investment and say today. Then a micro picture on that. If, for example, this is happening and it's not today. I mean, I came back to Pakistan from the World Bank in 2014, and I've seen, I could predict, never has electricity price on an annual average or a moving average gone down. It has not done so in any part of the world. Today, Netherlands, Germany are having the highest prices of electricity in the world. And these are people. So why do we... Sorry.
I'll just have a break.
Yeah.
Sore throat. Just take a break. After the break, we'll return and we'll continue. Welcome back. So, Durrani Saab, sorry. I had to interrupt you. Better.
No, so thank you, and I hope you're feeling better. But at the same time, I mean, let me just continue, and maybe Mughal Saab can shed some light. What I'm saying is that, the industry needs to have switch. Okay, if you're going to keep producing what you are doing, let's say you're into textiles, and within textiles you're into towels, and you think that you can still have margins and everything, and this is really pinching you, you would have gone to some innovative source. You'd have increased your efficiency. And I know if some of the Aftermath members are watching, they will say, Amer, we told you we've been doing this, we've gone to cogen plants, we've gone gas, we have tried to do thermal. No, there is fundamental inefficiencies in the way we produce, whether we like it or not. And to their credit...
Talking about productivity in general.
No, productivity is something very different. Inefficiency in production is away from production. It's an added measure to productivity, which means what is my actual cost of input? So cost of electricity, cost of this. Like if you currently go
Fixed cost and the variable cost.
The variable cost, right. So I think that, eventually, and you go look at agriculture practices. Our minister for, quasi-minister for agriculture today, I mean, if you go to Fakhr Imam's lands, you don't see innovation that you would otherwise see for a person that's been farming the same crop for over 50 years. Barring some seed innovation, barring some of that, you really don't see innovation coming on. And second, sometimes it's very hard. We have a romantic notion, my father, my grandfather grew cotton, so I'm going to be a cotton. No, the world doesn't work this way. There is no harm in importing cotton if you're producing something that you're able to export or act as an input intermediary variable to something of much higher value. I mean, just look at since
Chinese model, basically.
Yeah, exactly. They have been stepping up. So they have no problem buying wheat. They have no problem doing it because they sell so much, both internally and externally, that they really don't think about balance of payments at all. right? So I think that's a fundamental concern here.
Now, another important point, that one of the IMF's condition is about deliberalization and about privatization. So the moment we talk about privatization, there's hue and cry in the country that so many people will lose their jobs. The non-productive people should lose their jobs. These non-productive entities should be shut down or sold or privatized. So why not?
It's definitely,
The people's mafia or the unions.
It's political as well. Then there's got, the voters, so many people involved. Pakistan Steel Mill has not been in production for the last so many years. No output still, thousands
And
of
you're
employees
circular
getting
debt.
paid. The debt is increasing as well. So what would be the incentive? If I'm a taxpayer, you're a taxpayer, what is the money going, where is the money going towards? Is it going towards those industries that are not producing anything? Is it going towards the expenses of the government? Is it going towards the expenses of the government officers? Where is the money going? So why would you be willing to pay any tax? If I'm owed 100,000 or if I have to pay 100,000 or 200,000, but I would be thinking, where is that money? What am I getting in return? Am I getting any education for my children? Am I getting any health facilities? Am I getting anything else? And am I getting any security from the government? Is my business protected is my business insured? What would be the incentive? The businessman has done everything to grow their business. They have made it profitable. If you give the same business to someone in the government sector, it'd be making losses in a couple of years. Even a profitable industry would be will be in loss at that time. So what they want is that people who have worked so hard to make their industry profitable or make their business profitable. So they want them to that you have to put in more taxes on them. I don't think that there is an incentive for anyone. What we were talking about, that we have to adapt. It's very easy for you that if you have an industry, you sell it off. You can go to somewhere like Bangladesh. A lot of the textile industry over there has been
6.5% global market share.
Definitely, and the incentive they're giving. A lot of Pakistanis have gone there over there, and they're producing over there. So why would you want to change? You want conditions that are suitable for your business in Pakistan. If you're going to make the environment conducive for the business, then there's going to be a lot of people.
And one interesting point, sir. That is the example of Grameen Bank, women empowerment. That's what I call women. SAS program is not women empowerment or men empowerment or the family empowerment. It's just like making people beggars. This is what my personal approach is. Though the government has, in fact, they have believed and they still believe and they'll keep on believing that this is a great program to look after the poorest in the bracket. And also, primarily, it's been hailed and appreciated by a couple of foreign firms also, and that becomes the headline. The interesting part is, sir, that look at the model of Grameen Bank, what he did, how he did it, how he empowered the women. And when you talk about the emerging, or rather it has emerged, the textile sector of Bangladesh. So 60% of the employees are women in the textile. Don't you think, we could have done something of...
I think the government has tried to do something about it, giving loans to youth, in order to start their business.
That's what Mia Sahib also did, sir. Where is that program? God knows.
This is what happens.
Billions,
it gets
hundreds of billions of rupees were
it gets
allocated for that
repackaged, and then the terms and the conditions required to apply for that and to be eligible for that. That is a bit difficult over here. So access to finance has to be easy for someone. If you want people to be
access to finance, your interest rate is going to go further up.
First you have to meet the conditions. Then then what is the interest rate? That it all depends on that also. So whatever the current rate is, but first you have to be eligible for that, and the conditions are very hard. So if you want people to, everybody looking for a job over here, so this is what we're making. We're making employees. We're not making any businessmen. We're not making people. We're not giving anyone an incentive to be self-employed, because the conditions are very difficult for someone who has already an established business. And how do you expect someone who has never done business before? And we have to look into that. That the universities who are churning out so many graduates every year, they have to look what is required at the moment. We cannot
even when you talk about the students, so that MBA product or whatever the product is being produced in these universities, unfortunately. Hats off to them, sir.
It's
Because
it's just that, everybody's following
I don't
the
want to
same,
say
same
anything, but
textbook.
so you know exactly. I mean, they're producing clerks, basically.
Yes, definitely.
No innovation, no research work, nothing. Let's not call those universities universities.
Yeah, and plagiarism is one of the
University is a
biggest
place where
issues.
you create new knowledge, sir. Durrani sir, you wanted to add something?
No, I think that Mughal has made a very interesting point, and I think we need to go back to that, which is basically before we got to the university point, I think Mughal Saab was trying to mention something about, the fact that we are actually at that stage where we need to really go back and think, okay, how is it that we are intervening? This whole repackaged packaging part, for example, right? I think repackaged packaging, the question is, who do these packages, number one, actually target? The second part of it is that, this government may be looking at some of these, what we think are repackaged deals. I have a slightly different take on that, which is, take BISP, for example. Now, BISP was a parliamentary, the Parliament of Pakistan, doesn't matter who was in majority, but we should just look at BISP was passed with an overwhelming majority, and so hence the institution came about. What this current government has done, and I'm not really blowing their horn, but I think some share or let the devil have his due, is essentially around the fact that they have tried to make the program a little bit more holistic. While I do agree that at certain levels it does make beggars of everybody, but at the same time I think this thing which you talked about women inclusion, when you talked about having some skilling programs to match, so what NAB-TTC, NAFTIC is doing is essentially doing more than it was doing in the previous government, so that the people who come into this loaning program or this access to finance program, they are basically, have some greater opportunity.
All right.
But I think the important thing, and my last 2 points on this, is that in financial inclusion and interest rates, this is what I think his last point was, I think he has really put it very succinctly. If you look at it, financial inclusion, how many people are financially included? Let me take the definition of financial inclusion and stretch it a bit. The average SME around your house, my house, they don't borrow from the banks. In fact, the people who borrow from the bank is the problem of. So that is why I often say, jack the interest rate up as much. At least the industry will shed some sort of employees, and then some of these employees will go. Let me give you an example. So who benefits from lower interest rates? Exactly what Mughal said. Who has access to, right? So it's the large hoteliers, it's the large business people. How many of those are there? If you open up the Pakistan Business Council, there are 350 members or 360 members. That's about it, right? So these 350 people essentially control the productivity of the entire country, right? Now these people are the ones who get access to this finance, right? So yes, they create jobs, but look at how many delta jobs are they creating over time? Not a lot, right? In fact, because of mechanization and they are actually shedding these jobs. So I think the point to be made here is that basically the policy rate has very little to do with how you and I and the SME sector really go and do business. So the question then arises is that, before you start talking of policy rate, I think we should do a program on financial inclusion and stretch this definition. The day I can walk into a bank and simply give them my Nadra card and open an account, I think that's going to be the clapping time for Pakistan. The day that, half of my people, I have to force people who work with me, my associates, to open an account. Have you seen how cumbersome it is for somebody to open a simple private bank account, let alone get access to I am not yet eligible for any kind of loan, and I'm not exactly your poor man, right? So come, let's think about this.
When you go abroad, you talk about the credit history and all, and then
there is a credit history.
Now, if you have a good credit history,
an American credit union gave me a loan at the age of 17 and a half with nothing in my pocket, just because I was undertaking an engineering degree.
An interesting part was that perhaps that is an economy that is based on consumerism. I mean,
they gave me a loan. I mean, I could get a loan for anything. It's not just, no, don't go into the Shaukat Aziz era. A lot of people talk about that era, but think about it. Had he or she, now, I mean, well, let's say it was Shaukat Aziz and it was the politics of that time that actually ended up with most of us owning cars. Now, come on, we can't go there, okay?
No,
so let's assume that today we all know that, you know, we are motorized now. So some of these youth are now not going to use these loans to buy cars. They may buy a laptop or a cell, which is still more productive than a car.
Absolutely.
Right? So trust the people. We are nobody to,
The unfortunate part is, sir, when we talk about our domestic investor, why are we pushing them to go to Bangladesh or Sri Lanka or Turkey for that matter? Whereas we always look forward to welcome the foreign investors, yet they're not coming in. Let's be very honest. You know, forcing somebody to come in and, you know, give them the ideal environment and whatever, that's a different ballgame altogether. Stock market is not the real investment. I mean, investment is when, you know, you really are productive. It is not happening. It won't happen this way. I think because your domestic investor is more important because word of mouth makes more difference. Perhaps a person who has gone through that experience can persuade, if that experience is good, he can persuade the foreigners to come and join him or get into some sort of a business. Don't you think that element is also missing?
Definitely, you know, it's always been like that each and every government, each and every country, you know, they try to protect their domestic industry. And unfortunately, you know, whatever, whoever says, you know, even if you are having a joint venture with someone and you bring in someone from abroad.
Protecting your car manufacturers like Toyota, Suzuki and Honda.
Not our car manufacturers.
I mean, the assemblers or whatever.
Definitely. And
just imagine what kind of a product is being produced. I mean, I fail to understand that what sort of a material have they used when I see these accidents in Islamabad when car is like broken into two pieces, literally like a toy. I mean, it's unbelievable. And look at the prices.
You must have heard about the story about that, you know, the Suzuki was not willing to keep the price below 1 million because they were including airbags. And this was the reason that, you know, they delayed the production of Alto in Pakistan. So, you know, they have to look into that as well. And there's a lot of
those are not airbags. I mean, airbags is a totally different thing. I mean, those are little air balloons. They're this big.
No, but let's be very clear. I mean, sorry, if I may just quickly add.
Go ahead, sir.
That, you know, what Mughal again has made, and I mean, sorry, it seems like I'm coming totally in agreement.
You know, it's a good combination, actually.
No, I think, you know, look at it. The car manufacturer, there are two parts to this. They represent Suzuki. It goes in the name of Suzuki. It doesn't go in the name of Maruti, right? Had it gone in the name of Maruti and had they produced their blocks here, just like they do in India, had they been ensuring a minimum thickness of the sheet metal regulated by PCSQR Pakistan, just like in India, I would have said yes. Have you ever, I give you a test. The Indian embassy, we live very close to it, right? It's just in the neighborhood. Their Suzuki Maruti comes to get repaired with the same mechanic that my guy takes the Alto there, right? Try punching both of them.
You'll see the difference.
You will see the difference between the Alto Maruti versus the Alto Pakistan. So the thing is, who's benefiting? So what the benefit in Pakistan, the name is there. So they, as long as they pay their share to Suzuki, Suzuki is kind of cool
happy
with it, right?
Yeah.
They're happy.
They don't
now,
give a damn.
Two things need to happen because really, who's making money? It's the Ali Habibs of this day, Toyota Indus Motors. They control this whole thing. Suzuki.
There you go.
Look at Hino, right? So 4 people in Pakistan decide who dies and who lives on the road, right? Let me make it even more extreme. I think the people should be taking the Japanese to task. They should talk to the government of Japan, who enforces, by the way, some of the strictest motor regulations in the world.
Correct.
Right? Their health, safety, etc., is above German standards. So Germans, it takes about 4 or 5 years for a car to go below emissions. In Japan, it's a given. 2 years, the car is gone. Right? So the thing is that if they are so, I mean, let's talk about economic relations then, right? I mean,
well, it's a huge subject, sir, but I wish we could, but we should have
it relates
a
back to the fund, I'll tell you, simply because we have to pay dollars back. We import 30% of our basic car. I mean, why?
Well, that's $1 million question. But anyway, Durrani Saab, it was a pleasure having you. Thank you
Thank you.
so much, sir. Thank you so much, Mughal Saab, for your presence as well. And that's all we have for this hour. I'll see you inshallah tomorrow. Till then, you take good care. Khuda Hafiz.